Right, whose body do we have next inside of the mortuary ready for a historical autopsy? You're joking, right? He's next? Oh, wow. This could be the most high-profile person yet. I'll get an extra large table ready for him, as we are going to need it. Right, let's look up this patient's file. Henry VIII, the King of England, famous for 6 wives, surprisingly had a quiet death, despite the chaos he brought to his people. Now, this sounds like a complex case. Date of death, the 28th of January 1547, and the place of death, the Palace of Whitehall in London. Now, let's be real, we're doing an autopsy on one of history's most infamous and brutal kings, and it says in my file that we don't know for certain what actually killed King Henry VIII. Some speculation says cancer, heart disease, and someone has even written in here that he may have had syphilis. Oh, that'd be painful. So, pass me the scalpel, let's open up the patient, and let's dive in and assess the death of Henry VIII and try to work out his cause of death. Now, imagine this is Henry. He was the most famous king to rule over England. And if you ask anyone in the country what Henry VIII was best known for, it's the fact he had 6 wives. He caused a huge amount of chaos and carnage across his kingdom, but he was someone who was actually greatly loved by his people. Born on the 28th of June, 1491, he was never actually supposed to be king. Henry was the spare, and his older brother Arthur Tudor was the heir. Their father was Henry VII, and Arthur was being prepared for kingship. But he died at a young age from allegedly consumption or modern-day tuberculosis. After his father's death, Henry VIII ascended to the throne on the 22nd of April 1509, and he reigned until his death on the 28th of January 1547. As a king, we can really divide Henry's reign into 2 parts: his early reign with his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, and the later reign, which was plagued by relationship problems, executions, and significant health problems. Henry split from the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church in order to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and then marry his second wife, Anne Boleyn. He was known for his fury and his anger, and Catherine spent her last few years held virtually under house arrest whilst Henry lived it up with Anne Boleyn, his second wife. Now, Anne was probably the love of his life, and he lusted greatly after her for years, and eventually the king got what he wanted. Well, not quite everything. You see, he greatly wanted an heir, a son to become the king after his death, and this led him towards some of the worst crimes in history. Now, after Anne couldn't provide a son, only a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth I, Henry had her executed by sword inside the Tower of London. But during this marriage, there was a huge accident involving the king. This took place on the 24th of January 1536 at Greenwich Palace, and during a tournament in which Henry VIII took a joust, he was smashed off his horse, knocked to the floor, and his horse then fell on top of him. Henry was out cold, knocked out, unconscious for hours and hours, and many thought the king was going to die. But he somehow recovered. But it was never the same. It's been considered that Henry VIII may have suffered from a severe head injury. And there was also the lance of his opponent smashing him on the head. And then afterwards, he experienced a huge personality change. He became more of a tyrant and became much more short-tempered, but he also suffered from problems with a varicose ulcer on his left leg. And he also had ulcers later in his life on both legs, which caused him huge pain, and these never healed properly. The king had constant and severe infections from this and was in so much pain he couldn't walk in the final years of his life. Some claim the pain left him more ruthless, and then he went through successive wives, even executing his fifth as well. With the king less mobile, he ate and he ate and he ate. And he also drank and drank and drank, and he compensated for his pain with these comforts, and this altered his mood further. And the once healthy and fit king was now growing incredibly overweight, and he had a 54-inch waist. He weighed at least 300 pounds, probably more, and he needed to be lifted around his palaces by a system of hoists and pulleys, and he also needed lifting onto his horse. The image of the morbidly obese king with his festering ulcers was not a good one. Henry VIII's doctors tried to cauterize his wounds, and he also had a chronic stomach ache. But what happened with his death? So let's now look at what history says first. On the 27th of January 1547, the king, who was in his bed, was drifting in and out of consciousness. His doctors knew what was coming, and they were terrified to tell Henry what was going to happen. Sir Anthony Denny, the groom of the stall, told Henry that he would not live much longer, and the king asked for the Archbishop of Canterbury, Thomas Cranmer. Cranmer took hours to get to Greenwich Palace and to the king's bedside, and the king fell into a deep sleep. Henry was laid on a great walnut bed, and Cranmer took the king's hand and asked him to give him a sign. There was little response, and Cranmer touched Henry's hand, and the king grabbed the hand of the priest a little, saying he was still there. And around 2 a.m, Henry VIII died inside of his bedchamber, and it was a rather quiet and calm death for a man who had brought great chaos and upheaval. Right, let's begin this autopsy, shall we? Let's investigate what caused the death of Henry VIII. First, we'll begin our observation of the king's major organs. In my file, it says that some historians believe the king died from a stroke. So, let's look at his brain. Now, if he had a stroke, then we'd see that the blood vessels supplying the brain may be blocked or show signs of damage. There also may be damage to the brain, so we'll need to assess the brain tissue, looking for disrupted blood flow. Now, I read somewhere in his death account that he could not speak. This could be evidence for a stroke, as patients who have had a stroke can have affected speech, but it's not clear that that was a certain cause of death. Now, another hypothesis is kidney disease. And to get to the kidneys, we need to remove the intestines, the stomach, and the spleen. Here they are. Now, this is a condition in which the kidneys are damaged and they cannot filter the blood effectively. And it's often caused by high blood pressure and diabetes. Well, because of Henry's size, it's likely he had high blood pressure and diabetes, and these conditions could have also affected his mobility too. Now, can we see damage to the king's kidneys? Possibly. We would also see possible swelling in the feet, ankles and hands, and it's possible blood in the urine. To assess the kidneys fully, we would need to carry out a microscopic examination of the kidneys. So, let's try and prove or disprove the controversial possibility of the cause being syphilis. Now, many have hypothesised that Henry VIII suffered with his transmitted diseases, and symptoms of this include a loss of balance, sores in places you really don't want to have them, and eventually possibly even madness. Now, that would explain his tyrannical behaviour, and he did suffer from ulcers on the leg, but he never suffered from general paralysis of the insane, a severe neurological disorder. This is the condition that is closely linked with syphilis, with people going insane. Now, let's look for signs of gout. This is something that ran in Henry VIII's family, and drinking lots of alcohol, eating poorly could easily lead to this, and it would have affected his mobility, which is also proven by the historical records. There's also some belief Henry VIII died from old age. Now, looking at his body, it is fair to say he was an elderly man of the 16th century. He was 55 years old when he died, meaning that for the time period, he lived a very long time, probably due to the money and the power that he had, as poorer people would not have had access to the foods that Henry had. Now, looking at the body of Henry VIII, it is fair to say that he was not very healthy at all. He did not live a life in which he cared for himself, and he did not look after himself in his final years. So what do I think, looking at the evidence and the body, about what killed Henry VIII? I'll just place him down. Well, my conclusions are that the king died from a combination of factors. Without a doubt, his leg ulcers caused him significant pain and suffering, and affected his mobility, and this would have caused the king to quickly put on weight, and he probably ate to cope with the struggles he had. And with this, he got bigger and bigger and bigger, and he put a significant amount of strain on his organs, including his heart. He may have also had a stroke, affecting his speech, but it's more probable he did not speak in his final moments as he was so weak and so close to death. So I would conclude that it was lifestyle factors that caused damage to his internal organs, and with this his body then shut down as it was too much. Possible blood poisoning caused by the leg ulcers and infections could have brought death about quicker, but Henry VIII was an old man compared to life expectancy in the Tudor period. Thank you for watching, and to support, please make sure to subscribe. And once again, thank you so much for watching.